What if I told you that immortality isn't the ultimate dream, but the most twisted nightmare humanity could ever unleash upon itself? Buckle up, because what you're about to discover will shatter every fantasy you've ever had about living forever. Hit that like if you're ready to face the brutal truth about eternal life, because we're diving into a scenario that keeps sociologists, economists, and philosophers awake at night. We're not talking about some fairy tale of eternal youth and endless days of bliss. We're talking about a total collapse of everything that makes civilization function. A breakdown so complete, it would make our current problems look like child's play. Here's what most people don't grasp when they fantasize about immortality. Right now, every 72 hours, the world's population grows by roughly 1 million people. That's with people dying. Imagine flipping that switch off. Imagine every human being born from this moment forward never dies. The numbers become insane so fast your brain can barely process it. We're talking about doubling the world's population not in decades but in years, tripling it before you know it. And this is where everything starts falling apart in ways that make post-apocalyptic movies look optimistic. Let's start with the basics. The obvious stuff everyone mentions but nobody really visualizes. Food, water, space to live. Right now, we're producing enough food to feed about 10 billion people, but nearly 1 billion still go hungry because of distribution, waste, and politics. Now add another 8 billion mouths in 1 decade, then another 16 billion in the next. The agricultural systems we took 10,000 years to develop would crumble within a generation. Every inch of arable land would be under intensive cultivation, and still it wouldn't be even remotely enough. We'd be cutting down every forest, draining every wetland, converting every natural space into farmland just to keep up, and still we'd be losing the battle. But here's what'll really blow your mind. Fresh water would become the most valuable resource on the planet almost overnight. We already have 2 billion people living in areas with water scarcity. Now multiply that by 10, by 20, by 50, as the population explodes. We'd be fighting wars, not over oil, but over rivers. Entire nations would collapse as their water supplies run dry. The oceans might seem like the answer, but desalinating enough water for billions of immortal people would require more energy than we currently produce across the entire planet. And speaking of energy, this is where the scenario gets truly terrifying. Our electrical grids are already stretched to their limits. Add populations doubling every decade and energy consumption skyrockets exponentially. We'd need to build thousands of power plants every year just to keep pace. Solar panels, wind turbines, nuclear plants, everything running at maximum capacity, and still we'd be rationing electricity like we're in wartime. Power grids would fail. Blackouts would become routine. Entire cities would go dark for days because there's simply not enough infrastructure to support billions of immortal users who never stop consuming. Drop a comment below. Would you give up your immortality to save humanity from collapse? But here's where it gets really wild, where economists start to panic. The economy as we know it would completely disintegrate. Think about it. Right now, people retire around 65, free up jobs, spend lifetime savings, then die and transfer wealth to the next generation. That cycle drives entire economies. The housing market, pension planning, inheritance, everything depends on people eventually dying. Now freeze that cycle. Nobody ever retires because they can't afford to stop working for eternity. Nobody inherits anything because mum and dad are still around after 200 years hoarding every asset they ever acquired. The wealth gap that's already tearing us apart would become an impossible chasm to cross. The rich who are immortal would accumulate wealth for centuries, endless compounding building up until they own literally everything. Imagine Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, but with 500 years to accumulate capital, make connections, and consolidate power. They wouldn't just be billionaires, they'd be immortal emperors controlling resources that would dwarf entire continents. Meanwhile, everyone else would be trapped in an eternal struggle with no possibility of upward mobility because all the positions at the top are filled by immortals who never leave. Jobs would become impossible to get. Think about it. If nobody ever quits, if nobody ever retires, if nobody ever dies, then every position that gets filled stays filled forever. Young people, except there wouldn't really be young versus old anymore. Everyone just aging indefinitely would be locked out of careers, trapped in dead-end jobs for centuries because there's no way to advance when nobody above you ever moves. Unemployment rates would skyrocket to numbers that would make the Great Depression look like a minor recession. Housing would become the ultimate crisis. Right now, people buy homes, live in them for decades, then sell them or pass them on when they die, freeing up inventory. Immortals never free up inventory. Every home that gets bought stays bought. Every apartment rented stays occupied. New construction could barely keep pace with explosive population growth. And when every piece of land is built on, people would literally have nowhere to live. We'd be stacking skyscrapers on top of skyscrapers, creating vertical megacities so dense that sunlight never touches the lower straits. And still, there would be billions homeless wandering overcrowded planets like eternal nomads searching for any space to exist. Tag a friend whose mind needs to be blown, because here's where it gets psychologically terrifying. The human mind isn't built for immortality. Our brains evolved for lifespans of 70 to 80 years maximum. Neuroscientists have been studying how memory works, and there are limits to how much we can store. Memories from 500 years ago would become fuzzy, then disappear completely. You'd forget your childhood, your first loves, entire decades of experiences just erased because your brain can't retain everything. You'd live in an eternal present, disconnected from your own past, essentially becoming a different person every few centuries as old memories fade away. Boredom would become a form of torture. People talk about wanting more time to pursue passions, travel, learn. But after 200 years, you've read every book you care about, visited every place you wanted to see, mastered every skill that interested you. Then what? Another 300 years of nothing new. Another 500 years repeating the same experiences because everything's been done. Psychologists predict that existential tedium would lead to massive epidemics of depression. People would beg for an ending that never comes, trapped in an existence that's become meaningless through endless repetition. Relationships would crumble under the weight of eternity. Marriage till death do us part loses all meaning when death never arrives. Can you really love someone for 500 years? 1,000 years? Divorce rates would skyrocket because partnerships that worked for decades become unbearable after centuries. Friendships would dissolve and reform in endless cycles. Families would expand until they become unrecognizable, with thousands of descendants all living simultaneously. Family structure diluting until bonds become meaningless. And here's the truly dark twist nobody sees coming. Governments would collapse under impossible pressures. Democratic systems depend on generational turnover. New ideas replacing old ones as older generations die. Immortals would cling to power indefinitely. Imagine political leaders ruling for centuries, becoming so entrenched that elections become meaningless. Dictatorships arise naturally because nobody in power ever leaves it. Revolutions become impossible when tyrants can't be waited out to die. We'd be trapped under eternal regimes with no possibility of change. Crime would evolve in twisted ways. If you can't die, murder ceases to exist, but new forms of violence emerge. People would find ways to imprison others forever. Eternal prisons worse than death. Theft would intensify because financial security for eternity requires infinite resources. Wars would no longer be about defeating enemies, but about permanently incarcerating them. Frozen conflicts lasting centuries without resolution. Disease would keep mutating. Immortality doesn't mean invulnerability. Pandemics would sweep through densely packed populations with no room to distance. Viruses would evolve alongside immortal hosts, creating chronic infections that never kill but torture indefinitely. Healthcare systems would collapse, trying to manage billions of immortal patients, accumulating conditions over centuries. What all of this reveals is that immortality isn't a gift, it's a curse disguised as a dream. Every system that makes civilization work depends on mortality. Birth and death drive, renewal, progress, meaning. Remove them, and everything stagnates. Humanity wasn't designed to live forever, and forcing it into that mold would break everything that makes us human. So here's the deepest truth. Death isn't the enemy. It's what gives life value. The urgency we feel, the risks we take, the love we share. All of it is meaningful, precisely because it's temporary. Immortality would steal that urgency, that meaning, leaving us with a hollow existence, stretching infinitely without purpose. Smash that subscribe button for more deep dives that shatter reality into the impossible. Drop your wildest theory about immortality in the comments below, and share this with anyone who's ever dreamed of living forever. Because life is precious, precisely because it ends. an understanding that might be the most important wisdom we ever gain. The clock is ticking for all of us, and that's exactly the way it should be.